I have 4 kids. It's a lot to feed. I know what it is to put $500-600 in your fridge every week.
Do they really care? Do they really know what we're going through?
When Donald Trump says, if you were to strike, I'd fire you immediately, that's a huge red flag to us.
Red flag.
I think one thing Donald Trump's done a good job about is recognizing the harm that globalization has brought.
It's just a scary thing to sit there and watch someone with $1 million home and then watch 25% of my community starving.
I don't know what the solution to greed is. Church?
No issue matters more to voters than the economy, and our 2 candidates have pretty different views on how best to manage it.
$25,000 to help with the down payment on a new home.
We will pass larger tax cuts for workers.
In this episode of Swing State Debates, I'm in Columbus, Ohio to speak with voters from across the political spectrum, including a married couple, about which economic vision appeals to them most. Let's just start out by telling me your name, what you do, and or if you're involved politically in any way, and who you're voting for or leaning towards voting for. And why don't we start with you, Ray?
I'm Ray, so I work in a policy think tank called the Buckeye Institute in Columbus, Ohio, and we don't affiliate with any political party. And so right now I'm taking a look at all the candidates to consider who I'm voting for.
Yeah, I'm Alex, I'm a phys ed teacher, and I am currently voting for Harris Walsh.
My name's Robin, and I work in receiving. I unload trucks, and I am undecided.
My name is Jerica. I'm a political activist and a content creator on TikTok. And I'm voting for Kamala.
My name is Julia. I'm a consultant at Accenture, and currently I'm voting for Donald Trump.
My name is Jeff, small business owner of Andrews Improvements, and we'll be voting for Kamala.
I want you to give me one word that comes to mind when you hear Kamala Harris. Go, Jeff.
History.
Communist.
Brave.
I just feel like I'm not sure if she's going to be able to change.
Alex.
Compassionate.
Indecisive.
All right, now let's do Donald Trump, and we'll go this way. Donald Trump.
Decisive.
Dishonest.
I don't know. I see leadership.
I see domestic terrorism.
Survivor, debater.
Racist.
You described Kamala as a communist, I believe. That was the word that came to mind for you.
Yes.
Can you expound on that?
So she says she's a progressive, right? She says she's a progressive Democrat. Like I said, I think that's lost meaning. I think 10 years ago it meant something different than it means now. And I think it's getting closer and closer to communism, socialism, which I don't align with. I think the price control, I think giving out $25,000 to first-time homeowners sounds good in theory, but more than likely is just gonna raise the prices of all the homes by $25,000, so it really doesn't help.
Jerica, is Kamala a communist?
No, that woman's a capitalist like any other capitalist. That's why she's a millionaire. And I think like her progressiveness to me is not even progressive enough. I think that we're like largely out of touch with what we need to see happen in America. We're worried about the wrong stuff. You know, people are like, oh, transgendered stuff and all of this, like worry about your own genitals and, you know, pick politicians that are gonna write policies that are benefiting our children one day. As somebody who has worked her ass off, I did everything by the book. I did everything I was supposed to according to the American dream. I own a small business, for Christ's sake. Dropped out of high school, got my GED, went and got 2 college degrees. I don't own a home. I rent. I'm barely making it. Why? Right? And so people like Donald Trump, no, he's not gonna represent my best interest, but somebody like Kamala, she has a lot more in common with me than somebody like Donald Trump.
So I think you're our one officially undecided voter. This one's just being cagey. I think we know what's going on here. But so is that compelling to you?
I'm listening, you know, and I'm absorbing what everybody's
Who's
saying.
winning so far?
I'm still right in the middle.
I get it's hard. It's
Honestly, at this point, I'd rather vote for my cat.
Okay. Can you describe the U.S. economy in one word?
I think it's ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
How do you live?
Say more about that.
You know, I'm single, and I'm surviving on, you know, low wages. I make $14 an hour. I don't know how families do it.
How did you come to work where you're working now?
Got a divorce.
Do you have kids?
I do, but they're all grown.
So when they were growing up, I mean, how are things different
I was
now?
able to stay at home.
Yeah.
And, we saved a lot of money. I could stay home, cook, keep the house clean. Nobody, I didn't have to worry about childcare. But I think if I had to raise my family now, how would I do it?
When I go to a grocery store, for a while, prices have moderated a little bit. But like it used to be the last couple of years, I'd be shocked being like, half a cart of groceries is like $100. And I was like, where did this come from? And so then it seems like everything we're looking at, having to get new tires for a car, everything seems so much more expensive than the last time we bought it.
My husband and I own a small business, so we see it in materials all the time. In 3 years, we've watched material go up between 200 to 350%. Groceries, I have 4 kids, it's a lot to feed. I know what it is to put $500-600 in your fridge every week. I also know that before I was spending $175 a week on a budget. I'm now spending close to $300 to $400. So at the end of the day, the prices are high. We're feeling it. We're all broke. And economically, there's no answers, right? Because corporations don't want to pay anybody a livable wage.
Any of you have anyone or anything in particular that you blame for why things are so high right now?
Yeah, greed. Corporate greed. That's all it ever is at this point. They have record profits for a reason. You don't get record profits unless you're exploiting your consumer base.
I think the same. So I agree with her with the greed part. I see a lot of families who are really struggling, but there was at one point where prices did have to go up due to a lot of worldwide reasons, pandemic, wars, and a lot of corporations saw that people were willing to pay that much because for necessities. And so they just kept the prices at that even when they didn't have to. And I feel like that's still hurting. They're gaining their money off of the backbones of people who are working really hard and can't really afford it, but have to. I mean, there's no other solutions to feed your children other than food.
Who here thinks the Republican Party is generally concerned with working class people and good for working class people? Raise your hand.
I don't think anybody cares about us. I think they've all lost touch with us. I think they just want to tell us what we want to hear.
Mm-hmm. But you started to raise your hand.
Because I'm in between.
Yeah.
And so I would probably raise my hand for either one.
Huh.
But I just feel like they've lost touch with us. Do they really care? Do they really know what we're going through? I don't think they care. I think they just want to make a name for themselves.
Why do you say Republicans care about the working class?
I think their policies align well with what the middle class worker wants.
We're talking about working. I mean, and it's a silly term. I feel like anyone who works, you could call working class. But
Okay.
I mean, do you consider yourself middle class, or would you say that you're struggling below that?
I think I'm struggling below that.
I mean, I think middle class, I think a sort of sense of stability that's a bit more robust than what we've heard from Robin. So we're talking about, the people who are working jobs that pay $14 an hour.
Right.
Do you think that, what has the
Or
Republican
that
Party done for
slid
those
maybe
folks
out of
lately?
middle class, yeah. I think stamping down inflation, which is priority number one, so that your dollar does go farther. And I think the government spending caused a lot of the issues we're having now. I think the fact that we want to peel back government spending is important for that. So that would be my answer.
Ray, does that pass muster for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Good job. No, and I think there are other policies going back. I mean, I think, some of the welfare reform from the 90s was very helpful in earned income tax credit, so people that were working were able to pay less taxes. Paying less taxes is generally a Republican idea. And so I think that is what I think about there. I think one thing Donald Trump's done a good job about is recognizing probably more of the harm that globalization has brought. That has been harmful to Ohio, and it's still a good thing in balance. But for people in communities, right, where their jobs, went overseas, making sure that they can figure out ways to help those people and looking at apprenticeship programs, something along those lines. It's not a perfect solution, but I think it's part of the solution. And so I think Trump and some of the more recent Republicans saying, hey, let's take a look at what are tools we can offer them not tariffs, but looking at ways like community college support, that I think could really help the working class people.
I'm a teacher, I'm in the union, I work with the union, and when you see Joe Biden, who stood with the United Auto Workers, went to the picket line and stood with them, that's really big to us. That's something that shows solidarity that no other president has done yet, no other administration has done yet. And when you look at the working class, when Donald Trump says, if you were to strike, I'd fire you immediately, that's a huge red flag to us.
Red flag.
I mean, yeah, that just tells me that you don't care about the worker, you care about the bottom line, which is your money.
He says a lot of stuff. I'm not going to deny that, and I wouldn't say that if I was a political party or if I was his campaign manager. I wouldn't tell him to say something like that because I think that's an extreme position, and I think most people maybe wouldn't take that position. I think unions are important. They have good incentives and good purposes, but I think a lot of it is spun out of control, and maybe that's why he's said that.
When we talk about wages and stuff like that, so for example, as a teacher, fairly known low wage job. But I get to go to that negotiation table every couple of years, and I get to fight for that. And I have all the people behind me doing that. If we didn't have that, in my district it's 150 people, 150 people that could just walk out at any moment and say look, we're gonna go and strike if you don't meet our needs. We're struggling financially, physically, mentally, compensate us. We look at the records, we see what kind of money they have. And if we didn't have that, what would our wages be? People saying, they don't even want to raise minimum wage from $7.25. That's where we're at. Those are the same kind of minds that are running our jobs. If they were unionized, they could walk out. I think it was Waffle House in Georgia or something like that had a strike, unionized, went on strike, and got higher pay. We're talking about how hard it is to afford things. And a lot of people make that excuse. If I pay you more, I'm just going to have to raise my prices. But do you really? Or can you be a nice person and just take a little bit less, buy one less yacht? You know what I mean?
Okay, Ray, why can't business owners just be nicer people and buy one fewer yacht?
Because business owners, basically, their bottom line has to be able to stay in business, right? And so if they're paying somebody more input costs, that's going to come out of somewhere. And so if you take a look, most costs given to businesses are passed through to customers. So most businesses, again, there are some specialties, but most businesses aren't running big profit margins. So the grocery store, Kroger, a great Ohio company, doesn't have a big profit margin, only has 2 or 3%. It's a very competitive business. And so if they're paying all their workers more, prices, of course, are going to rise.
So Robin, sorry, we can't pay you $18 an hour because then everyone will have to pay more for their groceries. So what do you think?
I look for another job.
Okay.
Which is what we want her to do, right? You want to be able to get it. That's what somebody in a job like this could do. If you feel like and you deserve more, go out and get a better job.
Okay, so Robin, why not just get a better job? I'm
going to wait and see how much time goes by, see if they give me more money as I work there longer. I'm in line for a promotion.
Okay.
But I want that experience under my belt, if that makes sense, because I've not been working very long, and then I'm going to go somewhere else if I don't get more pay.
Does it feel like a fair arrangement to you? Or you go and you do this thing and they pay you these $14 an hour? Are you content with that? Does it seem fair?
It doesn't really seem fair, but I guess the way I'm thinking is the experience that I'm getting, I could get a much better job once I get another year under my belt. And then to me, it's going to be well worth it. It may not make sense to anyone else, but it does to me.
Does it make sense to anyone else here?
I firmly believe that you have to demand your worth in markets like this. And I believe that if you don't, they'll just exploit you and take advantage of you. We live in a society that has taught us that, it's okay if you suffer. It's okay if you work every day and don't have a dime. It's okay if your bills aren't getting paid, and that's what you deserve. And you should have to continue to do that until maybe one day someone will see your worth and give you a $1 or $2 raise. I just don't agree with that. So ultimately, you have to start voting for politicians that are going to write policies that make life easier, like terrain easier for families, working people. What I do know is that's not going to be a Republican, because we've seen that. Specifically in Ohio, we are so gerrymandered. Everything here is just kind of crumbling. And then on the outside of that, we have some dirty Democrats that are tapping in and using it for corporate interests and capitalists. So I would say that your best bet would be to dive into local politics. Politics isn't like a hobby, and it's not something that we should just jump into in and out on election years. It's a civil duty. It's a civil service, and everybody should be involved in politics.
All right, now your more right-wing advice for Robin.
If you feel like you're gaining the amount of experience that you want and that will allow you to leverage yourself into a higher paying position because you don't have experience because you were a stay-at-home mom, you raised kids, super important for the fabric of our country. I think that will be helpful in your future. It didn't sound like you were that unhappy with your, I mean, I'd love to be paid more. Would never love to be paid more. I'd love to make more money too. But unfortunately, like Ray said, there are a lot of companies that have very small margins. I'm not sure if that's the case with yours. I haven't looked at the books. But I think gaining that experience and being able to leverage yourself into a higher paying position is important.
What do you think the party that you're not voting for misunderstands about the economy? Anyone?
They misunderstand the people. They don't have anything in common with them. In fact, I notice that a lot with anybody in politics. And I notice more so people who lean more conservative, Republican, they tend to be people who were born into more money. They've usually had a little bit more privilege. They've, had...
Well, that's half the country, though, you're talking about, or half the voting population, so...
I don't know. Like, I come from an area that is very impoverished, very transient community, and, the medium wage and where I live is around $40,000 to $50,000 a year. My husband and I, we have to worry about whether we can afford our children's medication on a regular basis. Politicians are not worried about that because they're making tons of money. Republicans don't care if we can afford the things that we have. Democrats, however, they do want to make things lighter in society as far as like more social programs for people, which I believe in. I know a lot of people don't believe in government programs, but I do. I don't want my tax dollars bombing third world countries. I want my tax dollars to stay here, and I want my tax dollars to take care of me and my kids and my neighbors and my teachers and my roads and my infrastructure and all of those things. But we're not doing that. We're taxing the shit out of people and we're bombing people. And so, yeah, I'm for social programs. That's what we need.
Okay, Julia, what do you say to all that?
Yeah, Democrats are definitely going to implement social programs and raise your taxes to fund those, but I don't think that means they're going to stop bombing third world countries with your taxpayer money. I think they're going to do both at the same time. Like you said, they believe in big government. I believe in smaller government. I think natural supply and demand is what's most beneficial for a capitalist country. I think a lot of greed has impacted, like you said earlier, a lot of greed has impacted that graph to skew it a little more. Like all these big businesses, I do think, are trying to take from the little guy and put it in their pocket. And I think that definitely destroys a lot of economic theory, standard economic theory. But I don't think that big government is what's the solution to a lot of this stuff, I think.
What is the solution to the thing that you just said, though? That
the greed?
Yeah. Which sounded odd to me out of a Republican's mouth, that big corporations are taking money from the little guy to enrich themselves.
I mean, I wouldn't say all of them. I think businesses are good. They provide jobs for people like Robin, and I think that's good. But I also think that, I do believe that. I think a lot of the problems that have arose are because they just want more money for themselves. And I think that does impact the bottom dollar and the worker who's doing the work. I don't know what the solution to greed is, Church.
Better policy.
You said something earlier about capitalism. You seemed to say it very negatively. Actually, let's do this thing with capitalism. So when I say the word capitalism, what do you all think? We'll start with you, Ray. I'm sure you.
Prosperity.
I think dangerous.
I'm listening.
Exploitable.
Free market.
Greed.
How do you fix capitalism?
Modifying it, fixing it, making it work for people. Right now, it's working for a very small 1% of people, and the rest of us are kind of like, what the F is going on? And so, like, we can do capitalism better than what we're doing right now. What we're doing right now is late-stage capitalism.
What does late-stage capitalism mean?
Late-stage capitalism is basically what everyone considers communism. You know, you won't own anything, and things will be subject to privilege. Right now, I have a friend that works for Rocket Mortgage, and she said this year she only had, 3 families buy homes. The rest were management companies, big management companies, buying up all single-payer homes.
You're nodding, Julia.
I would agree with that. I think I've heard a lot about, big management companies buying up these hordes of homes so that the regular person, like
Yes.
you and your 4 kids and your husband, can't afford a house because they're driving up that demand because they're buying up the supply.
I think the problem with capitalism for me is it's just one of those things where people tell you, well, if you want to benefit from capitalism, be that CEO. But what if you're not interested in that? Like, what if you want to be a teacher? And
we need teachers.
And we need teachers. And I sit there and I watch some of our kids, and they come in, they haven't had a meal for 2 or 3 days other than at school. And I don't know how someone can look at that and then still be like, you know what, I want a third home. Let's go ahead and raise my prices just a little bit, or cut a few jobs, or something like that, just to be like, it's a free market. I can do what I want. I can raise prices. Someone's being a little more competitive. They're raising their prices. I'm going to raise my prices to match. It's just a scary thing to sit there and watch someone with $1 million home and then watch 25% of my community starving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're having feelings.
So I agree with a lot of what you said, but I would say I think sometimes we confuse a little bit like what's going on with our culture and community isn't really capitalism. Capitalism, I think, is an economic system, the basically foundation of property rights, free exchanges. If you take a look of countries that move in a more capitalist direction, poverty rate goes down, well-being goes up. Jeff Bezos is incredibly rich because all of a sudden Amazon made everybody's life much better and made Amazon stockholders very, very, very wealthy themselves, right? And so if you take a look, they were willing to pay Jeff Bezos a ton of money. What gets more interesting is and this is where I think, crony capitalism is the word that people use a lot of times, right? So it's like small CEOs know each other, board of directors aren't as accountable to shareholders. So at that point, you're willing, like, wow, why did this guy get so much money? I don't know. But I think if you sit there and say, what needs to happen is shareholders need to feel a stock appreciating to own. If they invest in a company, they need to feel like the company's being successful. And if they want to pay the CEO this amount of money, then that's up to the shareholders. And I'll assume that they know what they're doing because they actually have their money invested.
It seems the problem is that to get the biggest return on investment, you want to drive down labor costs as much as possible, pay people as wretchedly as you can.
No, that's
no.
So I'll challenge that, Ben, because Amazon is paying warehouse workers like $20+ a money, like delivery drivers getting paid a lot of money, and it's interesting because it's causing problems. Because I know people that, we all have small, well, except for you, I think you, Julie, but most of us all have kids, right? And changing diapers is no fun. So there's a shortage of like childcare workers for a while because it's much more fun to listen to music and drive a van than deal with screaming toddlers, right? And so if Amazon's
and get paid $7 an hour to raise somebody else's kid and be not appreciated for it.
Exactly, and so Amazon came in and disrupted the economics of a lot of places because they're paying so much more than childcare and people that, quite frankly, were doing terrible jobs and could have gotten paid more. And so anyway, so that's what I dispute the premise a little bit that it was terrible jobs. I think some of these are very well compensated, much more so than fast food.
Is America a place where if you work hard, anyone can live comfortably? Let's start with you, Jeff. What do you think of that?
I think some people are very, very limited to their options. A lot of people don't have the same opportunities as, let's say, me and her have gotten. We see that a lot with our employees. So, no, I don't believe that.
Julia, what do you think?
I would say yes. My answer would be yes.
How can you say yes, given some of the stuff that we've heard tonight?
Yeah, I think I know she's gonna launch into it, so I feel like I'm gonna agree with a lot of the stuff you're about to say, but I think now with the inflation and how far your dollar's gonna go, maybe not, but I'm an optimist.
I mean, I hear things like what Alex is talking about, like kids who have gone days without eating and things like that. It just seems like that's childhood poverty is a huge problem. I don't know the statistic here, but maybe someone, you probably do. What percentage of kids are living in poverty right now? Go.
I don't know the full percentage,
Whatever.
but I do know that 42 million Americans need food assistance right now. So,
I mean, does that complicate? I mean, really, America's a place where if you work hard, anyone can live comfortably. Like, is that, like, really?
What's the definition of comfortable?
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, okay.
Basic necessities, roof over your head, food on the table, a movie every once in a while. I would say yes.
Do you feel you live comfortably?
I feel I'm comfortable. I mean, like she said, what's your definition of comfortable? Because if I don't go out and spend, like overspend, Bath and Body Works, I can go to the movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just have to watch, I just have to budget, know how to budget.
She's not good for your agenda. She's far too content.
no, and see, for me, I would just look at that as like, you deserve so much more. People work hard every single day here. There's a teacher at my kindergarten who is on food stamps. She's teaching kids with special needs, but she needs help buying her groceries. So no, America is not a place where if you work hard, you can live comfortably or that you will be guaranteed success. That's something that doesn't exist here.
And that's where you go to another job.
Yeah. Yeah, so and then that's another question. How many jobs should it take for people to be able to be comfortable? In, the greatest, richest country to ever exist in the world, how many jobs does it take for you to be able to go to Bath and Body Works, for you to be able to watch a movie when you want to,
Raise your hand if you feel like you are living the American dream right now.
Well,
I think it depends on you. It depends on where you live. Some of these other countries think we are. I'm happy. I know I have a plan for my future. I know where I've been. I know how to get to the next step. I just have to be willing to do it and work hard and not be lazy and continue on track.
I don't really look at the American dream like everybody else does. I've kind of reevaluated what that actually is because I've done everything by the book, like I said before, and it's very much just the American nightmare. Maybe our parents and our grandparents had a much better terrain. Maybe they really loved it here and they thought it was like patriotic and all of these things, but not legitimately not having a good time. And every single day we fight for our lives to stay in the game, and that's on a spiritual level, a mental, a physical, financial, work, all of those things. So it's an American nightmare and I'm certainly living it, yeah.
Maybe it's a matter of perspective. I mean, appreciating what we have. My dad was an immigrant. He came from Egypt to escape persecution. He was a Coptic Orthodox Christian, so he came here when he was 8 years old, and him and his family came here. They moved to Cleveland. They achieved the American dream. I mean, he went to school. He's a doctor now. He's an anesthesiologist.
So do you believe that your family and your dad establishing themselves the way that they did made your life easier?
The fact that my dad was successful and his parents were successful in America based on the work they did. I think if my dad was unsuccessful, my life would have been more difficult. My dad's a very hard worker. He's very disciplined. He achieves what he sets his mind to. So I think if he would have failed at whatever he was setting out to achieve, whether that was becoming a doctor, or owning a house, or starting a family, I think he would have gotten back up and tried again. I mean, that's the story of adversity, right? Just plowing through that, and you get knocked down, you get back up.
So something that keeps replaying is what you said about perspective. We are very, very grateful for what we have, and especially starting from nothing. But the fact that we make the amount of money that we do and we still struggle it's mind-boggling to me. Like being a few paychecks away from bankruptcy. It's just crazy. We should not be there.
Do you feel like you have other options?
Everybody else seems to have options for us. One of them being, well, why doesn't your wife get a job? Well, we're $60,000, $70,000 in student debt for her bachelor's degree, and any jobs that are available to her are starting off at $17, $18 an hour. And if she goes to work for that, that doesn't even cover our childcare. You know, now we need to pay somebody to get our kids on the bus, watch them after school.
And then who schedules our job? Who does our marketing? Who does all of our content creation? Who's taking my autistic son to all of his therapy because kids don't want to play with him unless my kid has 30 hours of therapy every month to get along with atypical kids that don't even like him. So it's big, you know. We love to talk about how, you know, families are the heart of America and all this. So why are you making it miserable for us? Why are you making it hard?
Do you think that Donald Trump's platform is going to help families like hers?
I think, you know, one of the biggest things would be, I mean, as we talked about, is prices, right? And so, I mean, I know inflation's moderating. You know, the Fed cut interest rates yesterday, I think. And so I think policies like that are going to be key. Can we keep a tight labor market? And then keeping taxes as low as possible. We disagree on that, but I think that, you know, making sure that people at all tax brackets can have money, because I think people make better decisions on what they're going to do than the government. I think, you know, you want a tax policy that helps people that are working, you know, giving them tax relief. And so that's what I would take a look at, like the earned income tax credit. You know, those are policies that's tied to people that are working with children. And that's the type of policy I think that could be very helpful to working class Americans.
Do you reject any of that?
I would generally agree, but I also think that at some point we're going to have to like move away from just two-party politics because neither one of those parties are doing that.
I'm looking at the American dream as we have two choices. To me, that's not freedom. I'm held into almost this jail of like, which do I pick? It's one or the other, but there's more options out there, and sometimes they're better. But they just don't get chosen. So just that best person doesn't get chosen. Now I'm stuck with that person. You know, it's just that it's not the American dream to me.
Have you ever voted for a Democrat in a presidential candidate? Okay. So what is it that you're hearing from Democrats now or from the Kamala campaign now? Is there anything in particular that turns you off from anything you've heard from Democrats?
I just feel like we're given too much. Some people need it, the extra help. You know, if you've got the kids, you've got, you know, special needs kids. I mean, I don't know, you know, what you want to say with autism, but I just feel like sometimes we're given too much. I just think sometimes we're not motivated. Maybe that's the word I want to use. Not everybody, but I think a lot of them are. You know, my kids, you know, they can stand on their own.
What's your response to that?
Oh, well, first, I want to know, when was the last time you were handed something for free? Specifically from a Democrat, if you can.
Or is it that the Democrats are giving money to other people, but not to the people who you feel need it?
There you go. Like my stepdaughter and her family, they make too much money, but they can't survive.
So they make too much money because we have a crooked system that's set up that way. You have to be 130% below poverty guidelines to even receive any type of assistance in Ohio. So 130% below poverty guidelines. Let's really think about that, right? That's not just the government handing a whole bunch of people money. That's people who are struggling. That's people on their very last leg. That's people who legitimately can't afford anything. This idea that we're, you know, handing out free things or handouts, or that Democrats are, it's not happening. The reason why welfare is a thing and people are tapping into the system is because we have a serious need for it. We have stagnant wages. We have skyrocketing prices. People can't afford anything. That's why it exists.
I guess I see things, I mean, I want to feed, I want to make sure kids eat, you know, I want to make sure families are taken care of. But I know 3 of my friends who have all went to college for free, and don't do anything with their degrees. The one, she still, she's got phones that I don't know how she does it, but she has phones through Verizon, and then she has, I don't know what you call it, a welfare phone, the phone that you get, and she lets her kids have it.
There are people who use the system. I come from a family that welfare is their way of life. I know what it looks like when people use the system. But the reality is that's actually a very small percentage, and it's actually less than 2% when you look at the statistics. So those are important things. I think that we actually need to protect them, and I think that we need to add more because your friend that can't get, or your stepdaughter who can't get them but is still not able to make it, she should be able to. In fact, she's exactly the type of person I want my tax dollars to help.
Mine too.
It seems to me that some socialized government programs like they have in these Nordic states, that would be an example of something that's given to everyone. And so you wouldn't kind of have these sort of resentments for people for seeing instances where people are given government money and then that they don't need, right? Like, so the more right-leaning people here, like, why don't we see more support for that kind of thing? Like, I mean, why don't we have childcare in this country the way they do in other nations? And does that bother any of you?
So that's a great question. I think that you're starting to see a lot more proposals of people looking at how can you bring childcare in a way that makes sense. And the answer is it's expensive. And so how are you going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for it? And so it's basically a question of kind of values, right? Do you want to give money to wages? Do you want to give money to everybody? Do you want to put another burden on businesses? You're going to tax businesses, tax individuals more. So there's a lot of nuts and bolts that have been attached to it. But I think you're seeing a lot more progress in that direction, where you're seeing some Republicans coming forward with childcare ideas, as well as Democrats. So my guess is there'll be some type of fix relatively soon on that issue.
We're like a very diverse country. America, people come from all walks of life. So I think it's a little easier to apply sweeping social programs to countries like that, where everyone is very similar. It's easy to treat a population that's very similar. I mean, I have different health conditions than, other people because of background and ethnicity and where I come from.
Biology is generally the same across ethnicities and nationalities.
I mean, doesn't sickle cell impact African Americans?
With some exceptions, sure.
Yeah, I think, but that's my point, is that those exceptions are important.
I think the point that I've heard is that means there's not as much social cohesion, so we just care about each other less because these aren't the same type of people as me, is that not?
No, it's not so much I don't want to treat someone because they're different from me.
Not you personally.
I'm just saying that their treatment is different than mine because we are different, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I think when we approach things like that from that angle, I think we start getting into we tiptoe around eugenics, we tiptoe around prejudices, we tiptoe around preference, perception, all of those things. So ultimately, we really just need to work on expanding for everyone. Inclusivity is important. And that's not a huge platform for Republicans, but yeah, that's my response on that.
It'll just be more expensive to do it here because we are so diverse. That was my only point. So maybe it costs them X amount per person, it'll cost us 2X per person.
But you were saying something about greed earlier and how greed is a problem. It would seem that we could take some of that money and put it towards a socialized childcare program. Is that crazy of me? So some of the money Kamala does want to raise corporate tax rates. Could hypothetically some of that money go towards a social program like that? And would you Republican-y folks get behind that? Could you?
Probably not, because I'd be very concerned about how that money would, like a socialized program like that, right? Like we have a rich history of these programs starting small and getting very expensive very, very fast. Because once basically special interests get involved, it becomes a lot more expensive than people looked at it. I mean, a better way could be if you had to go a program like that, giving people money, let them find money on their own, as compared to setting up a brand new government program.
So it was the diffusion of responsibility again, if you noticed, right? Let people find it on their own. So our politicians, our government,
But
like we,
Jerica, don't you think people are more effective in finding, like deciding what they want, like providers what they want, than like a government program saying everything's going to be like this?
Absolutely, yes. However, we already have like discrepancies with that. We have a lot of childcare providers that are already subsidized quite a bit. And I think one of the bigger issues that we're having right now is that we have a shortage of childcare places. And
Yeah.
if we had more money, we had more incentive for families to like have kids. If we had these things, like, we would, right? I probably looked at 5 or 6 different places before I put my kids into childcare because I was super nervous about putting them in there. It costed me an arm and a leg. I finally found a place, but the waiting list on some of those places were 6 months, a year. So we don't even have enough, places for childcare. They're poorly staffed. They don't have enough money. They're all big issues, really.
Finish this sentence. If Kamala Harris becomes president, Ray?
We're less well off.
If Kamala Harris becomes president, I feel like we'll be a more highly educated country.
I just wonder about the, economics. I wonder, she's been vice president for almost 4 years. I wonder what she's really going to do that's different. Is she telling us stuff just so that we'll vote for her? I mean, I don't know. I'm still undecided.
If Kamala Harris becomes president?
I will be extremely grateful because my daughters will be able to see a woman in a leadership role.
I think if Kamala Harris becomes president, America will be left out of a lot of conversations, and I think the world will be more dangerous.
Being the first woman president, especially black woman president, she has some pretty big shoes to fill, and I think she will do that.
All right, if Donald Trump becomes president, let's start with you.
I worry about him making snap decisions and not good ones.
Okay.
I feel like my daughter will be less safe.
Why?
I just feel like a lot of the policies and the words that he says just go against women. I think I just don't feel like. I feel like if he starts saying those things, everyone feels safe saying those things and doing those things and encouraging those things, and I don't feel like she'll be in a safer environment.
I'm going to be very interested in who he picks for his cabinet and his other leadership positions.
That was a very Ray-like answer.
Yeah, I'll be ashamed. I think it's incredibly dangerous for pretty much everybody, but especially women and immigrants. I also think it will be awful for our economy. Immigrants bring hundreds of billions of dollars into our country a year. We don't have the bodies to replace that, and we need that money. It's important. And not just that, but that man's a rapist. He's a convicted rapist in New York penal code law. And I think it's shameful that we have so many people that will vote for a rapist. Being a rapist should be the deal breaker. That should be where the line is drawn. So yeah, if he becomes president, I will be deeply, deeply ashamed.
If Donald Trump becomes president?
I think my life would be better. I think we would have peace in the Middle East. I think the foreign wars would stop. I think the strength that he brings to the presidency would admit that. And I'd have more money in my paycheck at the end of the day, too. I think my dollar would go farther with him as president.
If Donald Trump becomes president?
I think we're definitely in trouble. And I say that based off of what I see in Portage County and the type of people that vote for Trump in Portage County.
What are those people like?
Quite often, we see Confederate flags in the back of, people that are voting for Trump, and they're just not good people. They're hateful, racist people in our town.
I have a hard time understanding why people would want to align with that based on like the economy or this or that. Like, okay? So other people being oppressed and attacked on a regular basis, our country being divided the way that it is, and it has consistently gotten worse since 2016, you know, the economy matters more to you? I don't really understand it. I think people have really messed up priorities.
Do you feel like there are Democrats out there who say and move in unattractive ways?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
you know,
no, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the problem is, hopefully, we're a 50-50 country, right? I mean, like you look at the polls, it's like 52-48, one way or the other. And so I get worried if we're going to identify one side with the worst of the people anomaly on their side. So I don't want to be aligned, with people, like that, Jeff. And so I get worried about that and saying, like, here it is. And I'd be worried about people on the other side saying, hey, you're the worst of people on your side, too. I think that is very harmful and divisive for the country.
When you think about it, the people that are being exposed and shown on TV and talked about in the news are like the 10% on the bell curve. So the 10% on the left, 10% on the right are the ones getting all the attention because that's what makes the news. That is what gets headlines. But really, we're all in that 60% of that bell curve, that big part that's really meshed together. And we have the same thoughts and we have the same ideals, but we're so conditioned to just be like, oh, no, this is the bigger headline. We should be voting for the majority of the people in this country who are in that 60, 75% who agree on most things. And if it's an extreme 10% thing, then let's just not do it. Why are we doing it?
Okay, Robin, are you any closer to knowing who you want to vote for?
No.
No? This was just a complete waste of time for you.
Not a complete waste of
Not a
time.
complete
You know,
waste.
I have a lot of ideas and
What's your cat's name so I can write it in?
Fluffy.
Fluffy. Oh, last name?
All right, well, I'd like us to each say what the best argument you heard from the other side was.
I think it's a lot about thinking about challenges, like from the working class perspective. Childcare is the perfect example, and so better childcare would have helped us. We're a dual income family when we had small children. I know where I think the problems would be with the government provided solution. And so I know what I don't want, but I'm saying, yeah, it absolutely makes sense. There should be policies that can help them get better child care for their kids.
So, I mean, honestly, the best argument for me is just, I don't know a whole lot about the economy. You know, I'm not an economy expert, so listening to some people talking about like just how that money trickles down and how this extra spending can hurt, but there are places that take it from. You don't think about the fact that there are places that we are overspending and probably just unnecessarily overspending.
I like the idea of having programs that we can kind of all get together and have things in common, but we're so diverse. How do you do that? But I do like the idea of being able to have more things to do together.
Thank you all for doing this. You've been terrific and open-minded and passionate, and I hope you tune in.